You're listening to Breaking the Silence on the Fight the Lies Radio Network. Welcome to the show, everyone. It's been a while. I felt the need to do an update for everyone because, well, it has been so long, and I just wanted to let everyone know I'm still alive. I'm still wanting to do shows, but to be honest with you, I've been sort of looking for direction, and, well, things have been busy as well. There's been a bit going on in the family. Work has been, well, work's work. And just had things around the home and so forth. And, well, as I said, I've been sort of looking for direction because, well, as we've said before, when we started this show, I guess primarily what was on our heart was to just reach out to people and help them, not to necessarily tell you the truth, but to at least get lies out of the way. And, you know, as I've said so many times before, don't take my word for things. Don't take them as truth. Don't take anyone's word for truth in things that, well, certainly impact you personally and things that will really determine your worldview. Anyways, so yeah, I've been searching for what I may or may not talk about. And to be honest with you, I really don't want to always sort of end up focusing on the big thing, so to speak, you know, as the last show covered conspiracies, and then our main show, Fight the Lies, we were covering the Nephilim and things of that matter, which, you know, are things that I definitely have some opinions on and some ideas on. But and as far as it being applicable to people's lives, I don't want to get too far removed from that because, I mean, there's any number of podcasts out there you could tune into and get this information. And from the sources, I mean, you know, people do interviews with people who write these books and who do these deep studies of these things. I mean, after all, that's where I've gotten a very large amount of my knowledge from. And so I don't want to just be regurgitating what others are doing. Well, I think it's valuable for multiple people to be talking about the same thing. It sort of gives validation and, well, you know, I can give you a reference to this person or that person, and then you could go find them and see what they have to say for yourself. But be that as it may, I do want to focus on things that are going on currently. And that brings me to, well, today is June 15th, and we just had this horrendous event happen in Florida with this, well, I'm not going to mix any words, this very committed Muslim who professed to be part of ISIS, go into a gay club and gun down a bunch of people. Now, here's the thing. Anyone who wants to say that goes against the nature of Islam, they're either delusional or lying, because if you read the book, if you listen to the sermons, if you listen to the statements they make, by and large, this is accurate to Islam. This is their philosophy. This is their belief that those they deem as abhorrent, those who they deem as committing abominations, those who they say are, well, even further than that, those who aren't Muslim, eventually their goal is to remove them from this existence. What this guy did was not an aberration from Islam. It was his being obedient to Islam. I mean, honestly, ISIS in and of itself is the purest form of what Islam is. Look, I'm not one to say that Islam is the greatest danger here on earth, that it's an existential threat, or that it's a fulfillment of biblical prophecy. I used to think that. I used to think that, well, Islam is going to be the beast, and the Antichrist is going to come out of it, and he's, going to be the 12th Imam and all that stuff. And I no longer have that opinion. My opinion is that it will be perhaps a component of that system. And it may be something, that individual that we call the anti-Messiah, it may be something that he seems to embrace, that he co-opts, but I do not think it is going to be the head of it. It's not going to be singularly the thing that we're looking to be fulfilled. I mean, honestly, we can look at, well, the apostasy and the aberrations in what passes for Christianity today and see an equal potential for it being a component of that system. So the bottom line is that we need to not be myopic. We need to not focus on these things and latch on to these interpretations, these popular talking points. So that all being said, at the same time, we do have to acknowledge reality that this thing called Islam is a legitimate threat to really any given human being on the planet's existence if you so happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Now, here's my opinion on what the situation is in our world today concerning Islam. I think that the powers to be, and yes, that's in part human agency, but in a more wise understanding, it's the unseen powers, the ones who are not human. It's a tool for them. It's a weapon to be used in order to bring about a certain end. And the end in and of itself is not the goals of Islam. The end of it is to bring about a certain set of conditions that they want to be in place. I mean, look at our past 15 years since 9/11. Look how much our nation, America, has changed. Look how much the world has changed ever since the radical, extreme, prominent rise of Islam and the war against it. Now, obviously, we should defend ourselves. Obviously, we should take action when it's called for. But it's been used by those in power in order to get us to accept certain things we would have never accepted before. And conversely, at the same time, we have our current administration and others who've been on the scene for a while who would tell us that we are wrong to be engaging in self-defense, to voice our outrage at these atrocities that are committed, because they really are atrocities. I mean, when you see ISIS beheading innocent people, when you see the things that they're doing, the just slaughter of whole entire populations, the situations that are going on in Syria and Iraq and many other places in the world, we should be outraged. And when they say they want to come to America and do the same things, believe you me, if they're able, they are going to do it. Now, as to whether this individual in Florida or others who've committed terrorist acts in our country, as to whether they are part of an organized network or if they are just individuals who have embraced the teachings and words and actions of ISIS, well, we don't know that yet. And I don't know that ultimately if it matters. I mean, does it matter if someone slaughters a bunch of people, whether they're part of a system itself or whether they just admire the system and are emulating it? The end result's the same. We really have to be so reminded when these things happen. We also have to think about another thing, and that is ever since 9/11, we've had all these threats and incidents occur, which one would think that certain things like our border would be secured and that we would be doing something besides accosting innocent Americans who are trying to fly to any given destination. one would think that if the threat was as powerful as we're told, that we would be taking measures to protect ourselves. And the last administration, as well as the current one, have done nothing outside of what they have been doing already, which is essentially violating all of our collective rights. And, I remember when our current president was running first time, he talked about this sort of thing and acting as if he was going to save us from this oppression and talking about ending all these wars. And he's gone into more wars than our previous president, who had gone into more wars than all previous administrations going back to George Washington combined. Both of them are the same. And well, we have to ask ourselves, are we better off collectively as a people today than we were 15 years ago? Or are we worse off? And I think the answer is obvious. There's a singular point I want to make here, and that is take all of the conflicts, all of the threats, all of the pressure points that we see today, take them in mind and think about the common factors. We have Islam. We have other extremist groups, like we have white racist groups. We have black racist groups. We have Hispanic racist groups. We have all these groups. We have what's deemed as extremist Christianity, which there are extremist groups. For example, Westboro. Everybody universally hates them. And let me challenge you, do some research before jumping to the conclusion that they are an example of Christianity, because they are not. They conflict with every single biblical point and value. But more than that, they're not just some crazy, loony group that materialized out of nowhere with no support. Do the research. There are connections. There's evidence to suggest that they are well funded by people who, if you knew who those people were, if you heard their talking points, you would say there's no way that they agree with them. Why would they fund them? But yet they do. We're talking certain non-government organizations, NGOs, and people who really are sort of the top 1% in America who support groups like Westboro and fund them, and groups like Black Lives Matter. And we have to question, why are they doing this? And if it's not because they agree with them, then what's the reason? And I would submit to you the reason is the same as the reason our leaders refuse to deal with Islam and refuse to deal with other things that we consider legitimate threats to our well-being here in America, like illegal immigration, which incidentally, there's been plenty of evidence to show that there are potential terrorists coming across the border along with the South American illegals. What I would suggest to you is that they are practicing what is called the Hegelian dialectic. There was a Jesuit philosopher named Hegel who proposed this idea, this method, which merely says that you take a thesis and antithesis, force them into conflict against one another, and out of that you have synthesis. Those two opposing points, because of the conflict, because of everyone's fear and outrage and concern about it, they will say, hey, we need to come together. We need to reason. We need to find common ground, and conflicts dealt with. And out of that union, you have what those who orchestrated the conflict sought from the very beginning. It was their goal to achieve the climate, the effect that comes out of this union. So if we take, for example, Islam, and we take what people consider to be the extreme right Christianity, your dominionist types, your NAR types, who, when you read their writings and hear some of their speeches, they sound really hardly any less violent in their aspirations than the Muslims. Well, to be honest, they certainly don't sound as graphic. They sort of mask some of their views in sort of pseudo-spiritual talk. They sort of spiritualize their speech and hide it in Christianese and all that. But a lot of the feelings, a lot of the thoughts, the heart of the matter is that they would seek to do the same if they decided it was necessary, and their so-called prophets have decided it's necessary ultimately. Well, so you take these two conflicting systems and you throw them against each other. And then we have this example today. You have all these events that are now being organized to attempt to reconcile this conflict. And most all of it falls under what in religious speak we call ecumenism. And that is essentially bringing together people of different faiths and seeking a synthesis, a union between them in order to bring about ability to reach a common goal. And so this is why I say that I think that both of these two extreme groups are components of this end-time world system that the Bible speaks of. Now, that's just one example. If we take something like, say, Black Lives Matter, who are going out and staging all of these protests and then going on these maddened rampages where they're causing havoc in cities. And then on the other side, you've got, say, the extreme right. They would say we need to do something about these people. And both the sides are, when you look at them in their most extreme forms, are both racist, and they both equally hate each other. They use each other's actions to justify that hatred. And so we have this conflict continuing and brewing and growing. One has to wonder what end is going to come of that. After all, we have all these proposals for gun control and for doing something about what's perceived as injustice against this race or injustice against that race. One has to wonder if, well, once again, this is the dialectical process that, say, for example, we want to do away with local police authority because they are discriminating and we need to bring in federal authority. I mean, heck, they've set the precedent in the riots that we had last year after, forgive me for not remembering, but the one young man who was shot by the police officer who was actually attacking the police officer. I mean, he brought it on himself. It's tragic that the cop had to shoot him, but let's face it, you or I, if you were being attacked, you're going to defend yourself. Cops are just human beings too, you know. Not that I'm at all unsympathetic to the injustices committed by some of those who do have authority given to them, because it happens, because we are human beings. And there are human beings who get drunk on power and who really just become just as bad as the criminals that they're tasked with protecting us from. So we saw that precedent set where federal agents were brought in, even National Guard, because of this situation. And you might say, well, they needed to come in. I mean, look, the local authorities couldn't handle it, yada, yada, yada. And look, they're all prejudiced against these people, so we got to bring in the feds. And we should ask ourselves, was that their goal all along? Not specifically in that situation. Not that, you know, it would be like, oh, yes, our goal is in this specific locality to have federal troops. But their goal is to set the precedent, to get us to say, we cannot trust our local authorities, people who may be our neighbors, to be the ones who protect us. We need Big Brother. We need the feds to come in because, well, somehow magically they're not as corrupt. Well, anyways, I'm sort of not staying too much on point here. You know, my entire real point here is we're looking back at this incident that happened over the weekend in this club, and we have to look at, here's another extreme group. Those of us who are true biblical believers, we don't like the rampant, well, what we would call perverse sexuality in America. And I'm going to call it that because it's not just homosexuality. There are those who are having sex with as many people as they possibly can. There's people who are, you know, cheating on their spouses. There's people who are doing horrible things, doing things to children. There are people who are addicted to porn. There are people who do all these things, and really, while we consider homosexuality particularly abhorrent, let me tell you, if I had to choose my sexual sin, that would not be one of them. But in reality, they're all just as bad. They're all just as destructive. And so we can't really single that out as being exclusively more evil than the rest of the sexual sin. But anyway, so we have this group that we have an extremist segment in, you know, the ones that go out in the streets and have to get in your face, the ones who are campaigning to be more and more invasive in our lives. I mean, after all, those of us who are heterosexual, we're not out here campaigning for our right to have sex with as many people as we want to or whatever. If you now have the right to have a civil union and so forth and so on, that's fine. You know what? That's the government's decision. And while I may not agree with it, as a believer in God, as a follower of Yeshua, as one who reads his word, I have to say, until you try to make me support it or endorse it, that I have to honor that to some degree. I have to, well, let's say I do not have the right to go out and try to stop them from doing what they are doing in their own lives, as long as it's not harming someone else. And even then, it's not really my place to, unless, well, you know, there's a unique situation happening where maybe someone's being assaulted and, you know, there's no one around to help them. But anyways, you know, we have this whole thing going on with the bathroom issue, right? I mean, I won't go to Target anymore. I never was too much of a fan of Target anyways, but particularly now. And it's not so much, again, that I think that homosexuality or transgender or any of that stuff is so much more evil than any other number of things in our society. But at the same time, I'm not going to support you who are actively putting this issue down our collective throats. And that's my freedom to do that. But I'm not out there with signs protesting it. I'm just not going to go there and give you my money. To be honest, as I said, I wasn't a fan of Target to begin with. If you actually do any sort of research or just reading some older news articles, you'll see they have a very slanted political view. They're not even an American-owned company. And here they are in our country taking business from American business, and they're trying to promote their values and transform our values to be more like theirs. We have this whole entire side of things, and collectively most, quote, conservative Christians are strongly opposed to it. Hey, it's the big point of conflict in our country today, right? I don't need to tell you that. Then we have the other one, the terrorist threat. And this guy goes in and murders them, takes from them their lives, takes from them their chance to turn away from the path they're on and turn to God. How do we know how many of those might have done that? And this monster robbed them of that. Regardless, I've committed enough sins myself, and I'm thankful that my life wasn't snuffed out before I had the chance to make the choice to turn to God and to be sorrowful of them. And guess what? I still make mistakes. I'm not going to call them mistakes. I still sin. We all do. We have no place to say that we're righteous. We have no place to condemn others. Yes, we're to judge, but in the purest definition of the word, we're to look at something and decide, is it right or is it wrong? Do I partake in it? Do I endorse it or do I not? But that's not to say that I'm supposed to pass sentence on anyone. And another point, according to the Bible, Paul says, hey, when I told you about these people doing these things, I wasn't talking about the outside world. I'm talking about amongst you. We need to be more concerned about what's going on within our own families, within our own congregations, our places of fellowship, whatever that may be, whether it's real or virtual. We need to be more concerned about that and staying true to God's word than we need to be about people outside who are caught up and trapped by their sin. Because let me tell you, you're not going to force them to be saved. You're not going to force them to do anything. And if you do, it's not going to change their hearts. They're still going to want to do it, even if you could restrain them in every way imaginable. Anyways, sorry for the rant. The point being is we have these two different sides. This guy goes in, he does what he did. And what are we now hearing? Well, we have the calls for more gun control. We have the calls for we got to do something about this ability for these guys to do these things. And we have some elements in the media attacking Christians over this and saying that we created the climate of hate that caused this to happen. See, they will not even acknowledge that the hate was by the murderer. The hate was from the religious system that he is part of. No. Is he not responsible for his own actions? Is the Quran not responsible for what it teaches? For what it tells its followers to do? Let's be honest with ourselves. Stop burying your head in the sand. Stop listening to what the talking heads tell you. If you want to defend it, then you need to pick it up and read it. Because let me tell you, it has some parts in there that sound nice, that sound loving. But it has parts in there that explicitly say, kill them, slaughter them, seek them out. Hey, check out what it says about the Jews. Once you've killed all the ones in sight, go looking under the rocks for them where they're hiding and slaughter them there. This is what it says. This topic's been beaten to death, and I'm not going to beat it to death. I have a point to this, and this is the dialectic process. This is the trap that we are all continuously ensnared in. And this is what I want to just make a point about. Look, do not allow it to trip you up. Do not allow it to achieve its goal in your heart and your mind, because what they are doing, I believe, is they are once again using the dialectic process. And it's not about taking away our guns, and it's not about all these other things. What it's about is getting us to embrace the answer that they're going to offer. I mean, we have this thing going on about homosexual rights and about hate against them and discrimination against them. I mean, they put themselves on par with race. If I was black, I'd be deeply offended. I'd be very angry about them equating their, quote, oppression with what my ancestors had. Now, what are they going to do out of that? And honestly, their goal is not homosexuality. Their goal is not to force homosexuality on all of us, contrary to what many voices in Christianity are saying today. Their goal is to use it as a means to an end, just like they've done with so many other things. It's the conflict once again. Someone pointed this out to me several years ago, and that was that we Christians who have been obsessing on this point and fighting all these laws that they've been trying to pass and going out and campaigning for laws to keep homosexuality from getting a foothold and to oppose gay marriage and all these different things, that those things may indeed have been in error. They may have indeed led to the very climate that we have today. They may have led to all these laws being passed, because what they were talking about originally, and not that I supported it, but what they were talking about originally was allowing government to put their stamp of approval on civil union. And they would be able to claim each other the same as two male and female spouses would be able to on taxes and for insurance purposes and all the rest. They were not at that point talking about getting Bible-believing pastors to endorse and conduct their marriage ceremonies. They were not talking about at that point forcing their way into Christian establishments as employees. But because we gave in to the lie, because we gave in to the fear and fought it so strongly, what did that do? That ramped things up. That caused them to get more incensed. That caused them to be like, oh, well, okay, you're going to try to stop me from doing this. Well, not only am I going to do this, but I'm going to try to take it to the next level. And then what did we do in turn? Well, we're going to take it to the next level too. And it really is sort of a mutually assured destruction, because out of that, they're setting us both at each other's throats, just like they are in so many other groups, as I mentioned earlier. And I think that they may even indeed in the future offer up something that would seem to be anti-homosexual. We think that, oh, that's their goal, is to establish homosexuality. But what if it's not? What if it is to merely set the conditions, as I said, once again, and to get us to embrace the solution to the entire problem? I feel like I'm repeating myself over and over here, and I do not want to insult anyone's intelligence by going on and on the same point. I just want you to be aware this is the way they operate. And I've said it before and I've said it again. Do some research. Read some of their writings. Listen to some of their speeches. This is the way they operate. To opposing ideas, groups, people, philosophies, set them in conflict, watch the chaos happen, and then offer to bring order. Because by that point, we're going to be crying out for order. Just like we have been with the terrorist threat, and just like I think we will be once again in the future. I think that they are going to, well, they're going to use this, I believe, to really, in the short term, to create a special privileged class. And we're going to see it get to the point where we're shamed and guilted into welcoming these people and groups into other places that we wouldn't have before. And it's not a gay conspiracy. See, if you get into discussion with anyone you know who may be gay, or someone on Facebook or whatever, that's their perception of what you think. That you think that, oh, it's this gay conspiracy and all that. No, they're being used. They're being victimized. They're being used to achieve the goals that they have in mind. And when they're done with them, they're going to be the next villain. They're going to be discarded onto the trash heap of all their other pawns, just like they've done so many times before. And to those out there who consider yourselves Christians, guess what? They're doing it with us too. As we've talked about many times on our show, we were part of, what I see now as an extreme cult within Christianity, who honestly, I see one day them or others like them are going to be the example that's hoisted up for all of us to see of what's terribly wrong with, quote, Christianity. And when they're done with them, guess what? They're going to be discarded once again. So I just really want everyone to just sort of try to maintain calm and composure in this. Our Messiah told us to tell others about him, to show his love, to tell them the truth, that he has come, that he has died for us, that he is giving us a path, one singular path to eternal life. And we need to remember that. We need to focus on that, because that's really our only job description. That's the only thing that we're called to do. Forget all the things to transform society. Forget all the things to save America. Forget all of this opposition to these various things. The one thing that we're called to do is to tell others about him, to reach out to them and tell them that he loved them enough to die for them, to be tortured for them, to take their many, many sins, just like they did ours, and carry them and be punished for them in their places. And that's the one thing that we are refusing to do. And I'll just say right now, from my part, because I have not done it like I should, I want to say right now for myself that, God, I am sorry. I am sorry for not doing the one thing you told me to do. Because let me tell you, we've given ourselves over to this fear and this anger and this bitterness, this outrage at these various things, and refused to give them the one thing that God says that we should give them. What does that say for us? Because deep down in our hearts, that we may not realize it consciously, we're making the decision to do the worst thing we could possibly do to another living being, and that is to knowingly deny them the truth and for all we know, send them straight to hell for eternity. That's not a short amount of time. Eternity is a long time, my friend. If you've ever burned yourself badly or cut yourself badly or had whatever various afflictions going on that caused pain, and it seemed like it went on forever before you got some relief, imagine that for eternity. Imagine that many, many, many times more, forever. And while we may look at some people like Hitler and others who've done beyond horrible things, are we really ready to say that someone who is a homosexual or even someone who's a Muslim deserves that we want them to have that? Because guess what? I deserved that too. Because just like so many others, did so many things that were, when we think about it, if we could begin to grasp how good and pure God is, that there were so many things that were just beyond abhorrent that we've done to him, because we really can't pretend to understand the true nature of reality. I had this discussion recently with someone who's becoming a friend about the nature of God and the creation of the universe. And did he enter our physical universe upon creation? Did he actually enter it and step outside of timelessness and into time? Or is it that he is outside of time and that as the Godhead, one component, one individual of that Godhead, Yeshua, came into this universe? And it was a very, very interesting discussion. I very much enjoyed it, and I won't go all into it here. But when we think about him being, we can't even think about it. Absolute purity, absolute good. I mean, we look at a puppy or a baby or something like that and think how innocent and how pure. That's nothing. That's completely corrupt compared to God. And we think of God in so many ways, yet we have no idea. We only have what he's told us in his word. And while we can begin to appreciate and see the nature of God in his word, because that's what he intended for us, we're too limited and too flawed to really truly appreciate it, to appreciate him for who he really is. And I think that he could explain all day long. He could have made the best video ever telling us about himself, but we're too disconnected. We're too limited in our very being to see him. After all, that's really why God told Moses that I cannot let you see me for who I really am, because you would die. That's how good he is. That's how perfect he is. What have we done against him? All of us. So who are we to say another who's trapped in their sin, who's been lied to and told that they're supposed to be that thing that they become when they do sin and give themselves over to it, that's who they are, that it's okay? I mean, that's the same as if some horrible monster came into your home and told your children that it was okay for them to do certain things to them and they should be all right with that. And you are the parent, and you're seeing this, and then you see another member of your own home come along and refuse to tell that child that they're being lied to, and they refuse to do their part to save them. How would you feel? Who would you be more angry at? Would you be more angry at the monster who did it to the child, or would you be more angry to the other child who saw it and knew it and refused to help? And that's my point. No, we're not supposed to go and tell people that these things are okay. We're supposed to tell them that they're very, very, to be simplistic, bad, but not in righteousness. No, we're supposed to tell them in love. We're supposed to tell them because we do not want to see them be destroyed in this life and worse in the next. Because after all, in reality, regardless of how it works out, regardless of semantics, this life, this existence, this universe, it's no different than a dream compared to eternity. it's going to be over with like that relative to eternity. We need to wake up and care. We need to wake up and look at what we were and what God has allowed us to be. And we need to value that. We need to do something with it. We need to go out there. And I'm not saying to go on this mad quest to find someone to save and to go out with tracts and all those different things. I mean, they did nothing for me. But I'm saying that if you believe that there's a God who transcends time and space and who knew you in your mother's womb, who knew you were going to accept him before he created the universe, and that he knows every step you're going to take, every choice you're going to make, every place you're going to be in, then you also have to know that the people who are in your lives, whether they're someone you work with or someone in your family or someone who just crosses your path in the grocery store, you have to know that God knew that person was going to. And if there is that glimmer of opportunity, that moment in time where you can show something of God's love, and then maybe the next step is something of his truth, then maybe you should do it. Maybe I should do it. I'm not sitting here in self-righteousness telling you you should do this because I'm so good that I do it, because let me tell you, I've far from done it. And one day I'm going to have to answer for it. And maybe in part of me doing this show is hoping that in some limited way that maybe someone out there hears, and that maybe in some way I am fulfilling what God wants me to do. And the only despair I have over the success of this show is as to whether or not I'm making the right choices in talking about what I talk about, and in hoping I don't drop the ball and miss the opportunities to share the truth. Not my truth, but God's truth. Because all these other topics I talk about, like the stuff that I've ranted about through this episode, those are things I've researched and the evidence is out there. But none of that is absolute truth. I mean, there are nuances. There's interpretations. Some things may pan out, some may not. But the bottom line is that God's word is truth. If you have chosen him, if you have been saved by him, then you have to say and know that his word is absolute truth. And that is the thing you need to be shouting out. Well, maybe not shouting, maybe talking softly, but you know what I mean. Well, I said this was going to be an update, and now I've gone on for almost 50 minutes here. I thought maybe it would be a half hour. I guess it's good because it's been a while. To be honest with you, I've sort of doubted myself and what to do lately. So hopefully this is, as I was speaking of moments ago, this is something I was called to do. This is, once again, totally off the cuff, and hopefully soon I'm going to be putting some more things out here more regularly. I'm hoping to try to start to get some guests on the show, because you guys are probably going to get tired of me rambling and ranting after a while. And honestly, most of the shows I listen to, I enjoy the ones with guests. I enjoy the host, but it's good to hear different points of view. So I'm hoping to accomplish that. Things being the size and state that they are, I don't know how much success I'm going to have in that. I've had one friend that I've been talking to that this may indeed happen with, and we shall see. If it's in God's will, it'll happen, and if not, it won't, and that's okay. But that's sort of something that I'm hoping to be able to bring here to the show, and hopefully, as I said, things are going to be a little bit more regular and consistent here, and that you guys will find good reason to continue listening to the show. And once again, you know, we're on Facebook. I'm not on there very often myself, to be honest, because, well, traditionally I do not have that much of a great opinion of what goes on Facebook and other social media. It's all highly addictive. I found myself get sucked in at times. So I'm kind of trying to not engage so much on there. But if I get a message from someone, trust me, I'm going to respond. And so, again, hammering the point, as me and Kelly have both made on our shows, please, if you have some thoughts, feel free to share them. If you want to send me a message, feel free to do it. I would love to get some messages here. Otherwise, I just feel like I'm a crazy guy sitting here on a mic talking to myself, and nobody wants to be that guy. Thanks for listening. Thanks for bearing with me. I hope this made some sense. By the time I'm done editing, I'm going to either realize this was right or, wow, this was a crazy rant. So again, thanks for listening. Thanks for bearing with me. Thanks for just paying these things some thought. And I will prayerfully be speaking with you all again very soon. Goodbye and God bless. Breaking the Silence is a production of Fight the Lies Ministries. Visit us at ftlradio.net. This program is released under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Intro and outro music by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com.